Chosen One, you didn't find this video by accident. This moment was written into your path long before you understood the meaning of your struggles. And today you are stepping into the revelation of why you survived what others thought would bury you. Something unseen has aligned to pull you here, and your soul already knew the words you are about to hear. The reason is simple. The time of hiding is over, and the season of remembering has begun. For years they whispered about your silence. They mocked your absence, and they wrote your story as if it ended. But what if I told you the very breath you carry is the page they could never burn? If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Because Chosen One, your survival was not just survival, it was prophecy fulfilled, and what once tried to erase you is now terrified by your presence. Stay with me, because the truth I will reveal today will explain why you will never have to walk through that same fire again. Number 1, the survival that speaks. For so long, they thought silence was your defeat. They assumed that the lack of applause, the absence of recognition, and the stillness of your name meant the end of your story. Yet Isaiah 54 verse 17 declares, "No weapon forged against you will prevail." And that truth was carved into your life even when you could not see it. Every attempt to erase you only became the stage where heaven wrote its unshakable testimony, that you live, that you breathe, that you still stand. Survival itself became the loudest sermon ever preached, not through words, but through the undeniable fact of your existence. Each sunrise you have witnessed is a contradiction to every curse that was spoken, every lie that was spread, and every shadow that plotted your disappearance. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you know survival itself became your victory. Because this is the hour where your breath speaks louder than their weapons ever could, and the echo of your existence terrifies them more than any words you could ever say. There are moments in life when silence itself begins to carry a voice. Perhaps you've woken from a dream that felt more like a memory, where you saw yourself standing in ruins, yet somehow untouched. Or perhaps you felt a whisper of something within saying, "You are still here," even when the world seemed to have written you off. That whisper was not your imagination. It was the sound of eternity, reminding you that survival is itself a language. Your very presence is a sacred contradiction, the unspoken testimony that no darkness could erase. Every breath you take becomes a sentence written in defiance of the story others try to write over you. This is where remembrance begins, not in grand speeches, but in the quiet miracle of your continued existence. You know this because you've carried the weight of confusion and the ache of silence more times than you can count. They called you fragile, dramatic, or too sensitive, not understanding that you were bearing storms invisible to them. You've sat in rooms filled with laughter and felt like a ghost, present yet unseen. You've poured your heart into places and people who never gave it back, leaving you to wonder if you were cursed to be forgotten. In those nights, when rejection felt like a brand on your soul, you wondered why your story seemed carved with sharper edges than theirs. But the truth is that isolation was never proof of your unworthiness. It was evidence of refining fire only you were chosen to endure. The silence around you was never emptiness. It was preparation. And what seemed like chaos was in fact the unseen architecture of your life. Every delay, every betrayal, every false ending was a scaffolding of a larger plan you couldn't yet perceive. Isaiah said the arrow was polished and hidden in the quiver, and that was you, sharpened, concealed, and reserved for the right moment. You weren't abandoned. You were kept in a place where the hands of your enemies couldn't reach. Each cycle of hardship that repeated wasn't random. It was heaven's way of training your spirit to see patterns beyond the surface. Pain was not punishment. It was prophecy in disguise, chiseling away what was weak so only the eternal could remain. To endure what tried to end you is to inherit the authority to declare it finished. What you thought was survival was always initiation. Think back on the subtle signs that followed you through the years. A dream that returned again and again, too vivid to dismiss. The sense of déjà vu when you stepped into certain places, as if you had been there before in another lifetime. The way your body seemed to tremble with unseen energy when danger approached, even before words confirmed it. The feeling of being carried when logic said you should have collapsed. These were not coincidences. They were markers, divine reminders stitched into your timeline. They were heaven's way of saying, you are not lost, you are being guided. And now, in this moment, the quiet confirmation rises. You didn't imagine the patterns, the whispers, or the way the world seemed to conspire both against and for you. The alignment you feel in your chest is not an illusion. It is recognition. What once felt like fragments of strange experiences now forms a coherent story. You were always right to sense that something deeper was unfolding. The doubt they projected onto you never belonged to you in the first place. What you carried was real, and now the proof is rising to meet you. Remember, awakening is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you always were. Underneath the years of striving, pleasing, and fighting for validation, a name long forgotten waits for you to speak it again. Your identity is older than your pain, older than your rejection, older than your silence. It is the archetype written into your being, coded in light before you entered this world. You are not broken for being different. You are marked because you were never meant to blend in. The memory of your origin has been waiting in silence, waiting for the day you will recall it as your truth. Today is that day, and from here, the shift begins. Survival itself becomes activation. No longer is your silence a wound. It is a weapon forged in fire. The sensitivity you once despised in yourself is revealed as sacred discernment, a radar gifted to protect you. The longing that made you restless was not emptiness. It was hunger for your true self. The ache that felt unbearable was the breaking of old skins, making room for your crown. This is your invitation to step forward, slow but deliberate, into the authority you didn't even know you carried. So let this truth rest upon you with the weight of a crown. You didn't just happen to endure. You were chosen to outlast. The reason you are watching this now is because your spirit has finally aligned with the revelation it was seeking. Nothing about this moment is coincidence. The very survival they thought was meaningless has become your greatest prophecy. You are the contradiction that cannot be erased. Comment, I carry the silence as crown. If you know your survival was never defeat, but destiny disguised. And stay, because what is coming next will reveal why their shadows could never hold back your light. Number 2, the memory that haunts them. They thought the story was finished, but memory itself became their prison. Each time your name is spoken, they are reminded of their failure. Psalm 118 verse 17 proclaims, I will not die but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done. And your life is the living proof of that decree. The same ones who swore you would never rise again now carry the torment of remembrance, and it lingers in their silence, in their dreams, in their restless thoughts. They see your face and are forced to recall that every plot, every whispered scheme, and every carefully planned downfall collapse in their hands. The haunting does not fade, because every day that you live free is another reminder of their defeat. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you know their memory is not your curse, but their own sentence. And understand this, the haunting they feel is not yours to carry. It is theirs alone, because you already walked out of the prison they built. It begins quietly, almost like a chill that passes through a crowded room. You sense something in the air, an uneasiness that doesn't belong to you yet seems to linger around your presence. It is the weight of unspoken thoughts, the heaviness of eyes that refuse to meet yours, the echo of words never dared aloud, but still vibrating in silence. Even before you understood who you were, you felt this strange resistance pressing against you. You could walk into a space, and suddenly the atmosphere would shift, though nothing visible explained why. That shift was not paranoia. It was recognition from the unseen. Something in you was already stirring, and they felt it before you could name it. The pressure grew heavier when you began to notice how different your experiences were compared to theirs. Where others were embraced, you were often pushed aside. Where others were praised for mediocrity, your excellence was met with suspicion or silence. You carried a sensitivity that made you feel every slight more deeply, every betrayal more cutting, every rejection more permanent. They told you to toughen up, to stop taking things so seriously, but what they could not grasp was that your soul had always been tuned to a higher frequency. That frequency made you a target, not because you were weak, but because you were already marked. Shame, doubt, and loneliness pressed against you like waves designed to drown, but still you breathed, and every breath was resistance. When you step back now, you begin to see the architecture behind it all. This was not random cruelty, but a response to your potential. Just as Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers because of the dreams he carried, you too were opposed not for what you had done, but for what your very presence declared. The wilderness was not punishment but preparation, shaping you in ways comfort never could. Systems, voices, and shadows all aligned to press against you because heaven's seal was already resting on you. You were never ordinary, and ordinary rules were never applied to you. The wilderness you endured was the place where illusions died so truth could live. Every battle was evidence of your anointing, not your failure. Look back carefully, and you will see the threads connecting it all. The betrayals that seemed to repeat, each one wearing a new face. The strange obstacles that appeared just when you were ready to rise. The draining environments that suffocated your fire while pretending to offer support. These were not coincidences, but recurring signs of the resistance you carried. Like light bulbs flickering before burning brighter, your life revealed patterns you could only now interpret. And once you recognize the pattern, you also recognize that it cannot hold you anymore. The prison begins to lose its walls when you see it for what it always was. For there was more at work than human opinion or personal jealousy. The air itself sometimes felt heavy when you walked into certain places, as though unseen watchers were waiting to smother your fire. Opportunities closed for no reason. Doors shut though you had the key, and silence followed your name even when your actions deserved recognition. These were signs of spiritual resistance, the fog that gathers when light threatens to break through. Not because you lacked power, but because your power was too dangerous to be left unchallenged. Your survival alone made the shadows tremble. They sensed something you had not yet remembered, that you were not one of many, but one of the chosen. In those seasons, how did you respond? Sometimes you grew quiet, convincing yourself that if you made yourself smaller, the attacks would ease. Sometimes you people pleased, giving away your energy in the hope that approval would heal the wound. Other times you carried rebellion in silence, refusing to bow but hiding the fire inside where no one could see. There were days you almost gave up, questioning whether the constant resistance meant you had lost your way. But the truth is that even your hesitation was part of the shaping. You were learning not just to fight, but to discern. The mirror of those struggles was always meant to reveal both your fear and your strength. And here is the turning point. What they meant as opposition was always confirmation. The haunting that follows your name is not your curse, but their sentence. They are haunted because you survived what was designed to end you. They cannot sleep in peace because your very existence is proof of their failure. Every plot, every whisper, every carefully crafted downfall collapsed when confronted with your endurance. You were opposed because you carried something they could not kill, and that survival has now become the mark of your authority. Understand this truth. Chosen one, you were not resisted because you were weak, but because you were powerful. The fire that nearly consumed you has crowned you instead. What they mocked has now become the echo of their own defeat. The haunting memory is not yours to carry. It is theirs, replayed in silence, in restless nights, in the questions they cannot escape. You are not the one imprisoned by memory. You are the one freed by survival. Comment: I move guarded by divine fire. If you know this word belongs to you, and stay, because the veil that once cloaked you is beginning to tear, and what was hidden is about to blaze into sight. Number 3, the authority that cannot be taken. Chosen one, authority is not granted by applause, titles, or recognition. Authority is born in fire, when everything that could break you tried and still failed. Job 42 verse 10 tells us, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. And restoration always comes to those who endure what most cannot. The authority you now carry was not taught in any school. It was forged in every betrayal, sealed in every tear, and stamped in every night you refused to give up. Heaven has inscribed a seal upon your soul, and that seal cannot be copied, counterfeited, or erased. This is why doors now open differently, why even your silence carries weight, and why your very presence unsettles those who once mocked you. Comment: I rise marked by the divine. If you feel the weight of this authority within you, and share a dream, memory, or moment where you knew your life had shifted, because authority once hidden in suffering is now rising as the crown you cannot remove. There comes a moment when a fragment of confusion suddenly falls into place, and what once seemed meaningless begins to carry undeniable clarity. You look back at the betrayals, the delays, and the storms, And for the first time, you see them not as failures, but as the curriculum of a higher school. Every rejection that once burned now glows with a strange light of divine purpose, as though heaven had been teaching you through silence what applause could never reveal. This shift feels like scales falling from your eyes, an unveiling that has been waiting for you to be ready. You begin to see your past not as wasted years, but as training in disguise. This recognition carries a strange power, the power of authority born not from theory, but from survival. That authority cannot be borrowed, and it cannot be imitated. It is as if the universe itself has always been speaking in hidden codes, waiting for the moment you would learn to read them. Numbers repeating in your days, phrases that echoed across seasons, dreams that stitched themselves into your waking life. All of them were patterns of a deeper order. The veil that kept them obscure is now torn, and suddenly you see that the language of heaven was inscribed on your very existence. These signs are not coincidence, but confirmation, markers of the authority resting on your spirit. Authority is not built in moments of ease, but in the quiet mathematics of suffering and endurance. Geometry becomes prophecy when the angles of your trials align into revelation. Your life itself is a scroll, and every scar is a verse. Inside, something undeniable has begun to intensify. Your intuition now speaks louder than fear. Your boundaries are sharper than manipulation, and your energy rises to meet environments with a clarity others cannot understand. You notice how your very presence commands reactions, even in silence. Some draw close without knowing why, and others recoil, unsettled by the weight you carry without words. This is the inner proof that what you endured was never wasted. It became the furnace that smelted authority into your being. Authority is not noise, it is resonance. And resonance cannot be faked, for it carries the vibration of truth. As the inner shift grows, reality itself begins to adjust around you. Opportunities appear where once there were only locked doors, but resistance sharpens too, for both are drawn to your unveiling. You realize that life has become a mirror, echoing back the weight you now hold within. The people who once dismissed you cannot explain why they now hesitate in your presence, but the shift is undeniable. The divine architecture around you rearranges itself to match the seal inscribed upon your soul. The authority you carry bends circumstances in ways logic cannot predict. What is within has finally become visible without. Then comes a memory, not of something new, but of something ancient stir within you. You realize that this authority was never given to you by man, but remember from before you entered this world. It is the whisper of sacred lineage, the echo of vows made in eternity, the reawakening of what was encoded in your spirit long before time. You are not simply living, you are reactivating. Dreams that once seemed strange now reveal themselves as fragments of a larger design. Your deepest instincts, once doubted, now prove to be the truest compass. This remembrance is not invention, but reclamation. It is memory turned into mantle. And now the future stands before you not as an empty canvas, but as a scroll waiting to be read aloud. Authority does not ask for permission. It walks where it has been sealed to walk. You no longer tremble at doors, because you know doors cannot close on what heaven has stamped open. The prophetic call rising inside you is not ambition. It is memory of destiny, awakening in its appointed time. You see now that the future is not something to build, but something to recover. What was always written is now demanding to be lived. And authority is the voice that declares it with unshakable certainty. The time of shrinking has ended. The resistance you once thought was condemnation has revealed itself as confirmation. They oppose you because they sense what you could not yet see, that you were marked with seal they could never touch. Now you rise with a voice that carries not bitterness, but fire, not revenge, but dominion. This authority is not loud, yet it thunders in the spirit. It is not violent, yet it topples strongholds. It is the reclamation of what was always yours. So hear this truth. Revelation is not the conclusion. It is the invitation to step fully into who you are. You have not only survived, you have been crowned in silence with a weight that no applause can confer. The authority forged in hiddenness is the authority that cannot be taken, for it is sealed by heaven itself. Your very breath now speaks louder than every word spoken against you. Comment, I walk hidden yet never lost. If you know this belongs to you, and share the dream, the challenge, or the inner sign that confirmed it. For authority does not live in titles, but in testimony. And testimony is the crown they can never remove. Number 4, the future that belongs to you. The past was fire, but the future is dominion. You are no longer fighting the same battles, because the contract of suffering has expired. Jeremiah 20 verse 11 reminds us, "But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior. So my persecutors will stumble and not prevail." And this is the reality of your next chapter. The old weapons no longer fit. The old patterns no longer hold power, and the old shadows cannot follow you into where you are going. Your future is not about surviving what was. It is about walking the freedom that has been secured through your endurance. What lies ahead is not repetition, but expansion, not delay, but dominion. Comment, "I anchor this truth in my soul," if you know that what is rising you is greater than anything that has ever come against you. Because the future belongs not to those who tried to bury you, but to the one who survived every burial and now walks crowned. There is a hush before the dawn when everything feels strangely familiar, as if you've already walked where you are now stepping. In that stillness, the whisper comes not as instruction, but as remembrance. You were always meant to rise beyond the fire. The flames of your past were never the end. They were the doorway into this new chapter. What once consumed you has now crowned you, and what once sought to erase you has become the foundation under your feet. It feels less like you are moving forward, and more like you are returning to a place you never truly left. This sense of déjà vu is not imagination. It is destiny catching up to your spirit. And destiny is patient, but it never forgets its claim. The hidden truth is that every chain you carried was time to fall, and now the sound of their breaking echoes into the future. You begin to notice how the very struggles that drain you are now fueling a deeper strength, a strength that feels ancient, as though borrowed from something greater than yourself. The expiration of suffering is not random. It was written long before you faced the battle. Jeremiah 20 verse 11 declares that persecutors stumble and cannot prevail, and your life is becoming the living proof of that scripture. You survived not to return to the same cycles, but to walk in a space where those cycles no longer exist. It is as if the atmosphere around you has shifted, disqualifying the old weapons from even touching you. You are walking into a reality where opposition can no longer repeat itself, because heaven has revoked its access. Your life now begins to feel like a scroll unrolled, each moment revealing text that was hidden until this very hour. The people around you sense it even if they cannot name it. There is weight in your presence, a gravity that bends their assumptions. They wonder why their old games no longer work, why the buttons they use to press no longer control you. It is because you have outgrown the frequency of their design. Shadows lose their form in greater light, and you are now clothed in a radiance that cannot be dimmed. The future waiting for you is not fragile, for it was built in the furnace of your past endurance. What was meant to break you became the ink that now writes your authority. And so the mirrors of the past no longer define the reflection you see. Once, you questioned your worth through the eyes of others, searching for approval in their distorted gazes. Now you understand that the gaze of heaven has always been upon you, and that is where your identity resides. The contract of pain expired the moment you realized survival itself was your testimony. From this point forward, your steps are not tentative but ordered, not trembling but sealed with divine certainty. Even silence becomes prophecy when it flows from the mouth of the chosen. You no longer strive for recognition, for your existence is already the sermon they cannot silence. There is an inheritance rising within you, not of silver or gold, but of authority and remembrance. You feel the weight of ancestral prayers, the cries of those who came before, echoing in your spirit like a river that refuses to dry up. What they could not finish is now in your hands, not as a burden but as a crown. The bloodline reversal is not about punishment. It is about fulfillment. The torch has been passed, but is no longer flickering. It burns like wildfire through your veins. You are not walking into someone else's vision. You are the continuation of a prophecy that could not be stopped. The very ground beneath your feet is sacred, for it remembers who you are. And here lies the paradox. The future is not something you're building, but something you're remembering. It feels like arriving home after a long exile, only to realize the door was never locked. The battles that delayed you were not denials. They were rehearsals for the unveiling. You do not have to fight for a place at the table, for the table was carved with your name from the beginning. It is no longer about asking for permission. It is about stepping into what was already promised. Authority does not beg, it remembers, and remembering is the act of reclaiming. From this place, expansion becomes inevitable. Where once you moved in survival, now you move in dominion. The seeds you planted in tears are rising as forests you cannot count. Blessings unfolding faster than you can measure. Doors that once mocked you are swinging open, not because of chance, but because they were waiting for this exact version of you to arrive. This is the shift from carrying weight to wielding it, from being hidden to being revealed. Heaven has already marked the boundaries of your inheritance, and no shadow can trespass against it. The future that belongs to you is not fragile, it is eternal. So hear this final truth. You did not just survive to start over. You survived to take over. The old battles are finished. The old contracts void. The old weapons shattered. You are not stepping into repetition, but into reign. Not into wandering, but into dominion. Comment, I stand chosen and sealed. If you know this word is yours, and share the vision, memory, or confirmation that revealed it to you, for this is not just the beginning of a new season. It is the unveiling of who you always were. You didn't just wake up, you returned, and the future waiting before you has always been yours. Chosen one, let this truth settle deeply. Your survival was never small. It was not a silent endurance. It was the undoing of cycles, the expiration of contracts, and the rising of a crown forged in fire. They thought their whispers could erase you, but you became louder than their lies by simply remaining. You were not chosen just to endure. You were chosen to reign, to demonstrate, and to carry light into places that darkness thought it owned. Every day you walk forward is a prophecy fulfilled, and your presence is living testimony that heaven never abandons its own. There's a moment in every journey when the silence itself begins to speak, and that moment is upon you now. You did not simply survive what came against you. You altered the very pattern of reality by standing where others would have fallen, like the collapse of a wave function in quantum physics. Your choice to remain upright determined the outcome of countless unseen possibilities. You were not just enduring pain. You were selecting a new path in the multiverse of your destiny. Every breath became a measurement that forced truth to manifest over illusion. What looked like chance was the unveiling of divine precision. And now you stand in the awareness that your survival is itself a revelation encoded in eternity. In visions that press against memory, your life reveals its hidden symmetry, like sacred geometry traced across the map of time. The betrayals you endured, the losses you carried, and the shadows that circled were not random. They were entangled threads that pulled you toward awakening. Quantum entanglement teaches us that particles separated by distance still mirror one another, and so too did your suffering echo with your destiny, no matter how far they seemed apart. Every heartbreak resonated with a future breakthrough. Every silence prepared the resonance of your voice. You were bound not to chaos, but to a design that even your enemies could not untangle. And in that entanglement, your crown was always waiting. Think of the furnace you endured as a phase transition, like water shifting into steam when pressure and heat reached their limit. You were pressed, cornered, and tested until everything that could be dissolved was stripped away. Yet what emerged was not the same as what went in. You became something that cannot return to its former state. Just as matter changes form, your spirit transmuted suffering into authority. This is why the old weapons no longer fit you. They were designed for the version of you that no longer exists. The pressure did not break you, it upgraded you. And now your very being carries the proof of transformation. There are whispers that come only after fire, and you have heard them in your stillest hours. They remind you that dominion is not given to the faint-hearted. It is entrusted to those who endure storms that outlast lifetimes. You became the breaker of chains by refusing to bow to cycles designed to recycle your pain. Each time you said no to despair, you forged a yes to heaven's will. This endurance is why doors now open differently, why resistance no longer feels like imprisonment but like confirmation of your authority. You're not just walking into a future. You're walking into a throne room that was waiting for you. The whisper has now become a roar inside your spirit. You were born to reign. Chosen one. The record of your survival is eternal, and your crown is secure. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, "I am chosen," to let this message anchor in your soul. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And remember this: survival was never the end. It was the beginning of your coronation.